Okay, let's get ready for part two. Now that we know the building blocks of an entity relationship diagram, we're always going to take a scenario. In this class, you'll have narratives where we describe a scenario in a company or a situation, some sort of business operation that we want to collect data about. And so we're going to describe it. We're going to start with something that you're familiar with, the NIU course system, and the relationship between students and courses and sections and instructors and grades. Um, so, first of all, before we jump in, when you're in Lucidchart, over here on the left, oh, that's our template gallery, you have a shapes palette, and you want to find your entity relationship diagram palette. It's right here, but it won't be here by default, so you'll just click on this shape search. You just type in ERD and click on that. You'll see this, and then you can actually pin it right here. And then that way it should, in theory, stick around. I've noticed sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And then you have these, and so basically it's just going to give you these four types of tables. We're going to use the one with two columns with the smaller column on the left because that's how we're going to do our entities. So the first step then is to go to our narrative over here on the right, and we're just going to highlight entities. We're going to scan and look for entities. So let's just do that. At NIU, students may sign up for a variety of courses. Entities are going to be largely nouns. So right there we have students. We're going to highlight that, and courses. So we know that there's going to be some sort of relationship between a student and a course, potentially. It then tells us students have an ID, a name, a GPA associated with them. And associated with each course is a course number, a course name, course description, and number of credits earned for taking the course. So hopefully you can see that these are attributes of students, and associated with each course number are these attributes: course number, course name, course description, and number of credits earned associated with the course. And then each course is taught by one and only one instructor. So there's another entity. An instructor has these attributes: ID, a name, a position, and each course can have multiple sections. So we're going to want to highlight sections because you should be thinking about what does a student actually enroll in. Does a student enroll in a course or a section? And each section has a section number, a class capacity, a meeting time, and a meeting place. And then grades are assigned to students at the end of each semester. So we're going to do grades last, but that is a entity, something we want to collect data about that's really important because as students we're in it for the grade. And so grades matter, and we're going to have to talk about how do we define a grade. Okay, so let's just start like this. We're going to take our first entity. We're going to say student, and then if I hold down Alt right click, oh, if I hold down Alt left click, this is backwards of what it is on Windows. I can drag another one out, or you can copy and paste. And then we want course. We want to have instructors. And if we copy another one out, we want section. And then when we're talking about sections and students, we're going to be talking about a grade. So let's do the next easiest part. So step number one is identify your entities, and we're going to create a box for each entity. Step number two is we're just going to go ahead and insert the attributes for each entity. And this is going to be somewhat iterative because some of the attributes are going to depend on the relationships that that entity enters into with other entities. But let's just start with students. So they've kind of listed them all off here. We have an ID, a name, and a GPA. So I'm going to actually be specific and call it a student ID. We have a name, and we have a GPA. And that's all that this says. I notice in the solution that I give you that there's also a major, which would be fine. We could come over here and add another field, and we could say a student has a major. Now a course, associated with each course is a course number, a course name, a course description, and the number of credits. So we're going to need one more. So we're going to do the course number, which could be called a course ID. It's the thing we're going to identify the course with. Let's just expand this out. And then it's going to have a course name. It's going to have a description. And it's going to have number of credits. And then when we go down to instructor, an instructor has an ID, a name, and a position. So instructor ID, instructor name, and we'll shorten that so it fits. I'm going to go ahead and make, because we have two names, we just want to make sure that they distinguish from each other. So, and then has a position, an instructor has a position. And then grade, if you notice over here, it doesn't say anything about what attributes a grade has. So we're going to come back to that. So let's go back and visit each of these and let's see. So step number 2 is to list out the attributes of each entity. And now let's go see if we can't identify a primary key for each entity. So hopefully it's obvious that a student ID, like your ZID, is an identifier. And that's our primary key. So over in the left column, we're going to indicate that that's a primary key by putting PK in the left column. Student name, GPA, and major, they are non-key attributes. So we're just going to delete that key. They're just there to describe a student and contain information about the student. Course, course number is our primary key. And hopefully that you remember that that means that course numbers have to be unique. So that means that our course number can't be something like 415 or 310, because those wouldn't be unique across different departments. It's going to be something that almost looks like an identifier. Or it may be a combination of department name and course number, what we'd think of as actual course number, like accounting 310, accounting 415. But regardless, this has to be unique. All the values have to be unique because it's a primary key. And then like over here, these are just non-key attributes. Okay, and when we come down to section, oh, did we forget section? Instructor, each course can have multiple sections. Each section has a section number, a class capacity, and meeting time. So we're going to have a section number, a class capacity, a time. Well, let's add a few more here. We're going to take some liberties. There's going to be a location that they meet. And I would say, let's distinguish time from term. Let's actually put that in here. So there'd be time of the day and the term that the section's being held and the location where they're meeting. So then the question is, what's the primary key? And we're just going to make it easy, and we're going to say the primary key is going to be the section number, which implies that it can't be like 1 or 2, because each course can have section 1, section 2. It's going to have to be something that's unique. Now, don't worry about that too much here. We'll get into that. And then grade we're going to save. We're going to come back to grade, ask about what the primary key is. But let's talk about relationships first, because that'll help us establish what the primary key and foreign keys are in grade. All right, so let's just establish a relationship between student and course. So if we ask about establishing this relationship, let's name it to make it easy to talk about. So a student, let's say, completes, because we're going to name this a little different, because a student would actually enroll in a section. It's a physical place, time. There's a time in space, a time in space and location that course is held. So a student completes a course. So if we have one student, how many courses do we expect them to be able to complete? Well, if they've just been enrolled as a student and registered as a student, they may not have completed any. So we want to allow for that. So we're going to say 0 to many. And a student is most likely seeking a degree, which requires many courses. So we put 0 to many. A student can complete 0 to many courses. Now, if we have a course, how many students can complete that course? Well, a course can have multiple sections, and in every section there's multiple students. So we're going to say that there has to be allowed to be many. Now the question is, do we do 0 to many or 1 to many? And in my mind, it makes more sense to do 1 to many, because there's going to be some minimum that's required for a course, like some minimum in a section that's required for a course to have a section that's offered. And if we don't reach that minimum, we're going to cancel the section. And so we're going to say 1 to many. And so right now we have, on the outside, we have many to many. So this completes is a many to many relationship. Okay, so far so good. Now let's talk about a section. For every course, we have multiple sections. And I'm going to move this grade out here because we're going to back into that. Okay, so let's establish a relationship between course and section. So if we have a course, we're hoping that there's at least one section. Technically, there's courses that might be in the course catalog that have never been offered. But let's say if we're going to create a course, and this comes back to business policies, we have policies that define these things. If we create a course, then there has to have been one section of it offered. And we hope that we'll offer many sections of that course over time. So a course is just kind of this abstract thing. This is what we're going to learn in this course, but then we're going to offer specific sections of it. So we got 1 to many sections that are offered. So let's call this offer, offered. And then if we have a section, it's going to be an offering of how many courses? And the answer to that is 1 and only 1. Because if we have a section, it's got to be tied to some course. And we're never going to have a section that's like an implementation of 2 courses. So a section is going to be an offering of 1 and only 1 course. So that makes this, on the outer side, there's a 1 and a many. That makes the offered relationship a 1 to many relationship. Now let's ratchet it up a little. Let's make it a little more complicated. When we have an instructor, he's kind of orphaned out here. How do we create a relationship with an instructor? Should a student have a relationship with an instructor? Well, socially, yes. But from a technical data collection standpoint, we don't really collect information about the relationships between students and instructors. Should an instructor have a relationship with a course? Well, I am one teacher of Accounting 310, so I do kind of have that relationship, but that relationship is established through sections that I'm assigned to teach. And so we're going to establish a relationship between instructor and sections. So I'm going to say an instructor teaches a specific section. And now we're going to come back to this. Let's establish this relationship right now. And if you're in your mind, you're thinking, but then shouldn't we know what course or courses an instructor teaches? And we'll show you that here in just a minute. So if I have an instructor, how many sections can an instructor teach? Well, depending how we look at this across time, there may be an instructor in a specific term that doesn't teach any courses. So we'd have to allow for 0. Or if they're a new instructor, they've never taught a course. So let's just assume that and we allow for 0. But then hopefully an instructor teaches many courses over time. So we're going to put 0 to many. One instructor, like Dr. Pickard, can teach 0 to many sections. And this may be a section of 310, a section of 415, a section of 320, so on and so forth. Now, if we have a section, how many instructors are assigned to teach that a section? And usually there's only one instructor of record, and there has to be someone teaching it, so we're going to do one and only one. Okay? So look at this. This is now a one-to-many relationship. And so if you were to ask, how do we know which instructor teaches a course or which instructors teach a course? So if I have an instructor, I could generate a list of sections they've taught, and each of those sections will map to one and only one course. So I could basically answer the question, which courses has Dr. Pickard taught? By looking at the sections he's taught, creating a list of them, and then looking back at the course that each section belongs. So because we have a one-to-many here and a one-to-many there, we can answer a question like that. And if we have a section, we could say, well, what teacher teaches that section? Well, there's only one and only one instructor that teaches that, and that section only belongs to one and only one course, so we could tell without any ambiguity what course that section is an offering of. So now let's ignore this grade over here and let's just establish a relationship between grade and section, because we're actually gonna call it grade. We could call it gets grade, assign grade. When we have a student, they're assigned a grade for a section. Now, hopefully that makes sense. You're not getting a grade that's associated with a course, because if you don't do well in the first time you take the course, you'll take it again, and that's a different section. So a grade is associated with a section, and a grade is associated with a student. So let's just talk about the relationship between student and grade. If I have one student, how many sections could they take? In other words, how many grades could they be assigned? Well, one for every section. So that means that if I'm a student, I may not have taken any classes, any sections, but I most likely am going to take many, and I'm going to get a grade in each of those. And so I'm going to put a 0 to many cardinality on this side. So a student can be assigned a grade for 0 to many sections. Likewise, if I'm in a single section, how many grades in that section are there? So if I have a section, how many students are assigned a grade in that section? And I'm not going to hold a section unless there's one. And so my minimum is going to be a 1, but my maximum has to be many. So if I have a section here that's got 15 students and I pick a student here, they're going to get a grade. But because I've got multiple students, I've got multiple students associated with that section, and therefore I'm going to have multiple grades. Okay, so here's the trick. So watch closely. I've got a many-to-many relationship here. And whenever I have a many-to-many relationship, I need to replace it with a many-to-many table here. So I'm going to stick student in the middle of this, and I'm going to make some room. Sorry, I said that wrong. I'm going to stick grade in the middle of this, and I'm going to replace it. Okay, so it automatically inserted that in there. And I'm going to, it gets a little more complicated naming these, so I'm going to remove the name. We're going to say a grade establishes a relationship between a student and a section. Now, remember, you almost have to see it before and after. I'm going to take grade back out of there. Remember that we're looking at the cardinalities of the original relationship. This is 0 to many. This is 1 to many. When I insert a many-to-many table, that's what grade's going to be. I'm going to insert a many-to-many table. I'm going to take those outer cardinalities and I'm going to swap them into the center. So I'm taking 1 to many here, and I'm going to make sure this says 1 to many. So you ready? So I'm going to go 1 to many and make sure that gets swapped right there. It came from here. And down here, it's 0 to many. So I want the inside to be 0 to many. And then I'm just going to like put a big black, oops, wrong one. Put a big black dot there and a big black dot here. Just so they're placeholders. Okay? So now we've got to decide what this cardinality is with respect to the relationship between a student and a grade and a section and a grade. So let's reason through this. Let's pretend like I have a grade. Well, what is a grade? A grade is an assignment made for a unique combination of student and section. So you can't talk about a grade if you're just talking about a student. If I say, hey, what's your grade? You should be thinking, well, in what class? Because you have multiple grades in different classes. And likewise, if I say, hey, we're in this section, hey, what's the grade? Well, you should be saying for what student. And remember, we did this in class with sales line items. We said you can't have a sales line item. You can't have a line item unless you have a specific sales order number and you have a specific product number. And together, they make a composite primary key. And that's the situation here. In the grade table, we're going to have a primary key of the combination of student ID and section number. In fact, I'm going to like underline both. I don't know how to do this in Crow's Nest. This is one of the difficulties of Crow's Nest. I'm going to underline both, and I want it to be clear that together they're a primary key. I wish there was a way that I could just merge these two fields. I don't think there is. And I could just have one primary key that spans both of them, like center it right about the center here, because there's only one primary key in grade. Now, there are two foreign keys because student ID points to student and section number points to section. And so we'll do this. Each one will be a part of the primary key. And each one, let me get this to move that way. Each one individually will be a foreign key. Okay, but this is misleading here. And then if we had a non-field, non-key attribute, this would be like a letter grade. Okay, and that would be a non-key attribute. But this is misleading here. Together, they're one primary key. The primary key of the grade table is student ID along with section number. They stand together as a primary key. Individually, student ID is the foreign key pointing to the student ID primary key in student table. And section number is a foreign key pointing to the section number primary key. So therefore, we have to talk about grade as a unique combination of a student and a section. So let's use that to figure out what these cardinalities need to be. You ready? So if I have a specific unique combination of a student and a section number so that I can assign a grade, so for instance, let's say Matt Pickard has ZID Z1234567, and there's a section called 1000-333. For that section and that student combination, there's one grade assigned. So can you see that any combination of grade is going to be a single student and a single section? So given that, think about this. If I have a student, how many unique student ID section number combinations are there? Well, there's got to be many, right? Because if a student's taken many classes, then they're going to have many grades. And so that's what this is right here. Do you see that? And we actually probably did this wrong. I think I needed to flip them the other way. If we say, can a student exist without taking a course, and we say yes, they could be registered, but they haven't completed the course, then we have to allow for this to be 0. But let's flip it the other way. I have a unique student section combination, a unique grade. How many students is that grade associated with? Well, if I have a grade, there has to be one student that it's associated with. So let me come down here. And if I have a grade, there can only be one student. So if I have a unique student section number combination, aka grade, if I have a grade, it can only be associated with one student and has to be associated with one student and can only be associated with one student. That's the one-to-one here. Let's do the same thing here. If I have a unique student section number combination, that's a unique student and a unique section number together, how many sections is it associated with it? In other words, a grade is associated with how many sections? It's associated with one and only one section. Okay, so let's change this to be one and only one. Does that make sense? In order for a grade to make sense, I have to have nailed down a specific section. Therefore, this grade is associated with one and only one section. If I don't have a section, I don't have a grade. If I don't have a student ID, I don't have a grade. And so there's a minimum 1 on both sides and a maximum of 1 on the other side. So let's go back and do this other side here. Section, if I have a section, how many grades can be associated with that section? And this is where I went wrong. When we actually flip these, this one used to be here, and this one used to be here. When we flip them, we want to flip them to the other side. So I did this wrong. This was, if I have a student, let's actually show you what we had before, just to avoid confusion. Okay, I'm going to move this up here. Let's see. Will this let me kind of do this? There we are. So what we said before, and let's review this. What we said before was if I have a student, how many sections can that student be enrolled in? Well, they can be enrolled in 0 to many. So assuming that they might be registered but they aren't enrolled yet, we have to allow for 0 right here. And we allow for many because they're pursuing a degree. If I have a section, how many students can be in a section? Well, there's got to at least be one. Technically, there's usually policies saying if you don't have like 6 or 9 or 15 in a course, then we aren't going to offer that section for that course. And so we're going to say there has to be at least one. We're not going to hold a section without a student in it. And there's going to be many students sitting in that room of that section. So this is what we had before, and I want you to pay attention to this. And the correct way to think about this is we're going to take this cardinality and we are going to flip it on the other side. So it used to be here, but we're going to flip it to the other side. I'm going to go like this. So I'm going to change this one to be 1 to many. And then I'm going to take this cardinality and I'm going to flip it to the other side. So let's flip that. So that's going to be a 0 to many. Okay, now let's forget about this one right here, and let's talk about these right there and see if it makes sense. So again, more practice. A grade is a unique combination of a student and a section. So if I have a section, how many unique student section combinations am I going to have? Well, I'm going to have one for every student in the class. And I better have at least one, because if there's not a student in the class, I'm not going to have the section. So there you have it. See, I have a section. There has to be at least one student section number combination. And we hope that there's many student section number combinations. Now, in those combinations, the section number will be the same for every combination, but the student number will be different. Okay, now let's do it this way. If I have a specific student section number combination, I'd expect that it's associated just with one and only one student. Now let's talk about this side. If I have a student, how many unique student section number combinations will there be? Well, they're going to have one for every class they've completed. But they may not have completed a class, in which case they'd have 0. That's what this is. But for everyone beyond 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're going to have a student section number combination, and the student part of that's going to be the same. It ties back to the same student, but the section number is going to be different for that student. And so we have 0 to many. Okay, and so once we've replaced that original relationship with our many-to-many table, we can get rid of it. And so we did. And that's how we converted a many-to-many relationship to a table. Now, notice how we placed our foreign keys here. Okay, so whenever we have a many-to-many table, here's the rule. And we're going to review this in class. Here's the rule. You take the primary key of both sides, you put them together, and they become a composite primary key of that many-to-many table. And individually, they're foreign keys pointing back to the table. So whenever we have a many-to-many table, like student section has a many-to-many relationship. So we create a many-to-many table. We take the primary key on one side, the primary key on the other side. We put them together as one. I'll repeat, as one, not two, as one composite primary key. And individually, they're foreign keys pointing back to the tables they came from. That's how we work with a many-to-many relationship. So we've already placed our foreign keys in grade. But here we have foreign keys. Every relationship has to have an exchange of primary key to create a foreign key. Down here we have a one-to-many relationship. Okay? And the way we do this is we always put the primary key, which we didn't finish this. The primary key is instructor ID. We put the primary key on the many side. Because for every section, there's one and only one instructor. And when we have a column like this, we can only stick one value in it. So section number can only have one value in it. You can't have a comma-separated list of values. It's going to have one section number. Likewise, we're going to stick instructor ID over here. I'm going to add one more. As the foreign key. So it's this foreign key, primary key relationship that creates this relationship, this teaches relationship. Okay, so let's practice that again. Here we have a one-to-many relationship. And the rule is you always stick the primary key on the one side. That's over here. So that's course number. On the many side. So again, we're going to add one more here. We're going to say course number is going to be stored in section table as a foreign key. Because for every course, for every section, there's only one and only one course that it belongs to. For every section, there's only one and only one course that that section belongs to. Okay, and so we stick the foreign key, the primary key on the one side, we move it, we copy it to the many side, and stick it in that table to establish the foreign key and the relationship. Now, we've covered many to many, and you can see that up here completes is a many-to-many relationship. So we would need to replace it with a table like this, which we won't do now. Student to section was a many-to-many relationship, and we replace it with this many-to-many table. So we've covered 2 of the 3 types of relationships. Many-to-many, the rule is create a new table, take the 2 primary keys, put them together as one composite primary key, and individually they're foreign keys. And then when we have one-to-many, you take the primary key on the one side and stick it in the many side as a foreign key. Those are the 2. The ones we've missed is, if we go back to relationships, we've missed one-to-one, and we'll cover that in class. But this should get you started so that you can start some of the practice. So if you take a look in Blackboard, if you go to Module 5, scroll down, there's ERD practice. I've given you the solutions, and some of the solutions need to be improved upon. I've given you the solutions. You have the narrative, and then you have the solution. And again, this solution's not as complete as the one we just did. I need to update it. And then you have another narrative, then you have a more business-related narrative, and you've got things to practice with. So this should give you enough material to start practicing. On your second exam and on the final, you will have to create entity relationship diagrams. So that's how we take a narrative and we convert it into an entity relationship diagram.